quick overview here. Anne-Marie Bonneau is an award-winning cookbook author, a blogger, fermenter, and sourdough baker. She is the author of The Zero Waste Chef, Plant-Forward Recipes and Tips for a Sustainable Kitchen and Planet. And she has lived plastic-free since 2011. And that is a noteworthy credential that we're going to discuss more. And so through her social media, her blog, and her book, Anne-Marie shows others how reducing their trash not only benefits the planet, but also satisfies their taste buds, improves their well-being, and boosts their bank accounts, which we're going to circle back to also. She has been featured in the LA Times, NPR, The Guardian, and other major publications. So Anne-Marie, thank you so much. Welcome.
Well, thanks, David. Thank you for having me.
All right. I'd like to start with this very noteworthy point that you made in your bio, which is that you have lived plastic-free since 2011. Now, the more that I am learning about the ubiquitousness of plastic, the more that sounds like an amazing accomplishment. So what is your definition of plastic-free? Give us some details on what that accomplishment actually entails. And then we will spend the majority of this talk, I'm sure, learning from you how we can all do that.
Okay. All right. Well, you can't do it overnight. Let me start off there. So for me, plastic-free means I don't buy any new plastic. I don't buy any single-use plastic. That's the biggest problem. So I buy food from the bulk bins. I buy lots of fresh produce, unpackaged produce. I don't eat ultra processed food. That stuff's all in packaging. However, I still have a Cuisinart food processor. It's about 20 years old. It has a plastic bowl on it. I still use that. I'm not going to throw it out. It works. So I didn't just, when I decided to break up with plastic, I didn't just take all of my existing plastic and throw it out. I didn't throw out my plastic mixing bowls that I had back then. I waited for those things to break down and then replace them with non-plastic items. So there is still some plastic in my home because like my new stove, my range, the knobs, they look like metal, but you can tell, you feel them, they're plastic. So I'm not, I don't live in a yurt in the woods, although that does appeal to me. So does that answer your question?
Yes, that's a really good starting point. I mean, that sounds very reality-based, actually. And I think that one of the topics that we'll cover here, several people have already asked, actually, before the event started, about the difficulties of doing this. And many people are really trying, and they have very high standards, but they're just finding that they can't do all of it. There's only a certain distance that we can go with this, unless we really do want to,
Right.
go back, 500 years, which is not a bad idea, actually. But that's an excellent introduction. Now, let's talk about a question that's been vague in my mind for some time, and it's probably something people are wondering about. We do think about recycling the plastic, and if we get stuff in, we want to do something good with it. But what is happening with plastic recycling? Is it really being recycled, or is it just ending up getting in the landfill or the incinerated anyway? What's happening?
Right. Okay. First of all, still recycle your plastic. Put it in the bin. the solution is reducing plastic. However, if you do have some plastic, put it in the recycling bin. So recycling is a market-based system. You sort your stuff, you put it in your recycling, the truck picks it up and it takes it to the MRF, that's material recovery facility, I believe. It's all sorted. I highly recommend if you can go on a tour of your recycling facility, go. It's eye-opening. I mean, when you see the mounds of plastic in just your town and you multiply that. Anyway, so the stuff goes to the MRF and it's sorted on conveyor belts, all these different conveyor belts. There are people picking things out and they sort through it. They put the different types of plastic together and it gets squashed into big bales. Now, if someone buys that bale, then yes, it will be recycled into new products. We're producing so much plastic, we cannot possibly recycle all of it. Virgin plastic is often cheaper, and so companies will opt for virgin plastic instead. So if that bale, if nobody wants to buy that bale, it's going to end up in landfill or it'll be incinerated. The recycling rates in the US for plastic are about 4 to 5%. Worldwide, they're about 9%. But still, I think it's worth it to still put the stuff in there because it could be recycled. And then things like metal, aluminum cans, metal cans, those have a high rate. Paper has a higher rate. Plastic's very, very low. We cannot recycle our way out of this problem. So the companies that are producing this stuff, they need to be regulated. But in the meantime, keep trying.
Right. Yeah. That's the main point. Don't buy it in the first place.
Yeah, if you can avoid it in the first place, I mean that's the solution. But it's hard. So for me, I live in Northern California. We have year-round farmers markets. All the produce is loose. Hardly anything is in plastic.
Right.
Like nothing really. Maybe, yeah, I don't think there might be one thing at one booth. And then I live near bulk bins. So, but if you
Right.
don't have those nearby, there are still things you can do. A lot of grocery stores have unpackaged produce. If you have to buy stuff in a package and if it makes sense, maybe get the biggest package you can. And then at least that's less plastic than a bunch of little bags. If you're going to eat the food, because you also don't want to waste the food.
Right. Well, I think that one of the most important questions with all of this is what is the hardest to get rid of
Like the hardest.
in terms of our lifestyle? What is the hardest thing to say goodbye to? It seems like there's so many things that are just absolutely, completely embedded in our modern life. And this actually touches on your work as a zero waste chef also. And they overlap, which I want to talk about a little bit. But in your experience as a zero waste chef and someone who's gone plastic free, what is the hardest thing to stop using?
Okay. Well, I don't own a restaurant, so but there is there are zero waste restaurants. There aren't very many, but it can be done. Sorry, what was your question?
The question is, what is the hardest thing
Oh, the hardest thing.
to say
It
goodbye
depends.
to?
So it's going to be different for everyone. And another thing people ask me often is there anything you miss from the before times? And really, there's nothing. Because the food I eat now is so much more delicious, and I can't think of anything I missed. But everyone will be different. For me, the hardest thing was personal care. I found that. I remember so back when I started in 2011, my daughter Mary Catherine she was 16. My other daughter, younger daughter Charlotte, she was 10, and she wasn't really aware, didn't care about this plastic thing. But Mary Catherine was way into it, and she did a lot of research, and she found me a shampoo bar and a plastic-free deodorant. Neither of them worked. I used them at the same time. I was a mess. my hair looked terrible and the deodorant didn't work. And so figuring that out was hard because now there are all kinds of shampoo bars. And I may not be selling it now, but I used one today. They're way better now. There are a lot more resources out there now. So yeah, dental floss, toothpaste, that stuff was all, I found that the hardest things to change. But like I said, it depends on where you live. The question I get when I give talks all the time is, what about my prescription medicine? And I say, well, keep taking it. Like, you can't worry about all the things. Start with the big stuff, start with the easy stuff. If you drink a lot of bottled water and if your tap water is okay, then cut the bottled water. It's got microplastic in it. If you need a water filter, there are EWG has a whole they have a big section on their website about water filters, which ones are the best. And some of them remove PFAS, I think reverse osmosis, which is PFAS is related because PFAS and endocrine disruptors, they all stick to the plastic. The plastic in the oceans, it actually absorbs that stuff and concentrates it and on and on and on.
All right. Okay, good. Good overview. Now, this is the topic that I will be exploring more next week, is going to be getting much more into the microplastics. And so let me give a few terms here. There's macroplastics, microplastics, and nanoplastics, okay? And macroplastic is basically the trash, and microparticles are around 5 millimeters and down, and then nanoparticles are smaller. So all of these are totally different subjects, actually, when you start getting into it. And the nanoparticles are the most concern medically. And so that's where we start to get into the medical detox discussion. But for this, you brought up the subject of bottled water. And this is a question that has come up. Do you know a specific type of filter that is necessary to get the micro and nanoparticles out?
I don't know specifically. EWG though is a really good resource, and they have a big section on their website about water filters. So
EWG?
yeah, environmental working group.
Okay, maybe Karen
Yeah.
can pop that in.
I believe it's ewg.org.
Oh, okay. Maybe Karen or Wendy.
Yeah, I mean,
Can-
we don't have a water filter, and I've been thinking that we should get one because of the PFAS.
Can
So,
you give a definition of that for people who are not familiar?
oh, PFAS, polyfluorinated, forever chemicals.
Right, forever chemicals. That's an
Yeah,
easy way to
forever
remember.
chemicals. So, they're in, well, they're in a lot of things, but they're in food packaging. So like they render paper waterproof and greaseproof. So
Oh,
popcorn bags, those microwave popcorn bags, some of the paper boxes you get to go food in, they look very environmentally friendly, the paper ones, but they may be treated with PFAS because that keeps them, from leaking all over the place. So yeah, PFAS, the stuff's all related. Um, Non-stick pans, they have Teflon. I think they changed you can probably speak more to that, David. Teflon, I think, has a different formula, but it's still like it's all bad.
it's all it's all bad.
I mean, I use yeah, like, they use a different P acronym,
Right.
you know. I use a well-seasoned cast iron skillet.
Good solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's if you season it well enough, seasoning means just cooking it with fat. And every once in a while rub some fat on it and heat it in the oven. And it makes this nice coating, and basically doesn't stick, becomes non-stick, and it cooks, cast iron cooks so well. I love cast iron.
Yeah, nice. Well, speaking of which, you're mentioning these packages that we get and they look natural, but there's all of these things that are claimed to be, biodegradable. And I don't know. I mean, I'm I have an aversion to using those kind of goopy, sticky green things that are at the Whole Foods. So, what is that stuff? Is there such a thing as like an actual non-toxic biodegradable plastic bag?
So everything biodegrades. Biodegradable kinds, but means about as much as natural. It really doesn't mean anything. So everything breaks down. Plastic breaks down. It breaks down into smaller pieces. Compostable is a little different. So there's compostable plastics, but it's compostable where facilities exist, and they do not exist. They're in very few cities. The machinery is so expensive, and it just is so extreme to build multi-million-dollar facilities with this heavy machinery to compost a product that is throwaway when you could use a real fork. It seems so extreme to me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of my impression about all that. I mean,
Well,
it
can I
seems
say,
like it seems like there's some efforts at least being made by industry now. I mean, I think industry is recognizing that something needs to be done, but I think a lot of this is just greenwashing.
yeah, there's a lot of greenwashing. Yeah. Um, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
let's
And unfortunately, yeah, we shouldn't have to do this much research to feed
right.
ourselves.
Let's 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 put this into a bigger context here, okay?
Okay.
And that is that you and I imagine that the majority of people on this call are fortunate because we are educated enough to know that this is a problem, first of all, and to be here and talk about it. And I imagine that the majority of people on this call are also in a socioeconomic uh, condition where we have alternatives, okay? Because let's be realistic about this. I mean, I said, I'm questioning this stuff at the Whole Foods, okay?
Mm.
I can go to Whole Foods and I also go to farmers markets, okay? But the question that remains is how much of this is really kind of like a luxury for people who have the money for alternatives? Because really, if you consider where the majority of plastic is, where it is produced, and where it is used and where it is dumped. Okay. Uh, we're fortunate in Northern California to have these kind of resources where we have alternatives. Okay.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned that doing all of this going plastic free is also easier on the pocketbook. It's better for the pocketbook. But let's look at that.
Okay.
Is that really true? I mean, do we really save money doing this? And are we not just talking about something that we're incredibly fortunate to have all these alternatives where the rest of the world doesn't?
Right. Yeah. I think it does save money because when I started, I really just wanted to cut the plastic waste or the plastic that I was bringing into my home. I wanted to break up with plastic. And, I didn't realize that I'd have all of these other benefits from it. And one was definitely saving money. But it's a holistic approach. So I stopped buying snacky type foods. Those are expensive. And, if I wanted a snack, I'd eat a piece of fruit. Stopped going to the cafe, or I'd bring my own thermos. The cups are lined with plastic. And I stopped wasting food. So that saves a lot of money. And if you aren't buying, if you're wasting less food, you're throwing away less plastic, because there's a chance that some of that food came packaged in plastic. And I stopped buying things I didn't need. So I looked at everything, I guess, by focusing on the plastic, I looked at all of my consumption. So I guess cutting the plastic alone, I think it will save you some money, but I think if you look at everything as a whole, you'll save money. So I buy a lot of things secondhand. I just don't buy things I don't need.
Right. Good. Well, you are also presenting yourself as the zero waste chef, and we are talking about plastic free, and they overlap, of course. Now, my question is, was going plastic free the start of entering into your learning curve and your teaching about zero waste? Was plastic really the key to all of this?
Yeah.
Was it a lot
Yep,
of
yep.
other things?
No, it was plastic. I mean,
Mhm.
I read about plastic in the oceans, and I was horrified, reading about animals ingesting it and feeding it to their young, getting caught in the discarded fishing nets. There's not a lot I can do about the fishing nets, but anyway, yeah, so I wanted to break up with the plastic as much as I could, and then it just snowballed. And then I started fermenting all kinds of things, because I wanted to make vinegar. I wanted to have vinegar, so I learned how to make vinegar. I started to make carbonated drinks, kombucha. Kombucha usually comes in glass, but it's really inexpensive to make it yourself. And yeah, then I just I guess look, just started. It makes you more conscious. You're more conscientious about what you're buying. You're more intentional, right? Because you're thinking, not that I like obsess over every little thing, because that will give you an ulcer, but just think twice, like, do I really need this?
Right. Excellent. Okay. Well, I know that the entry point for a lot of people is learning about what's happening environmentally, and is really disturbing. And that's also where we're actually getting the majority of exposure is because it's ending up in the environment, and then it's breaking down and getting into the water and the soil. And then from there, it's getting into the food chain.
Yeah,
And so this is probably, at least in my own learning process with this is probably the hardest part about all of this is, the decisions we make about buying things is one level of empowerment, and we have some choices, and we can be proactive and participate more in the things that you just mentioned, making our own, fermented foods and buying at the farmer's market. These are all things that a lot of people are doing, but there are things that we cannot do anything about if we want to eat. Okay.
right.
And so let me just ask you about what your knowledge is about the most challenging things that are coming in through the food chain, because that's the other side of it. And that's where the medical information comes in, because we can cut out our consumption, our use of the macroplastics. But really, the medical issues are coming from the nanoparticles that are in the food
Right.
and that we're breathing.
Yep.
So, it's a more challenging subject to look at the things we don't have that much control over, unless we are really uh, off the grid. And, that's not possible for
Right, right.
lots of people. So, in your mind, what are some of the most challenging things to deal with in terms of food, and what do you do about it? There's already a whole bunch of questions that have come in, like, what about sea salt, and what about tea bags, and what about honey? These
Yep.
these kind of things. What is your take on this, and what is your advice? I'm sure you've talked about this a lot.
Yeah. So we're drinking, eating, breathing microplastics, and you can't avoid it altogether, but there are some things you can do. You mentioned tea bags. Tea bags, this is one of my big pet peeves. I drink a lot of tea, and so I drink loose leaf tea. That's my solution to that. If you can buy loose leaf tea, put it in an infuser or put it in a teapot and then use a strainer when you pour it out. And I think the tea tastes better. There was a study in 2018 out of McGill University in Montreal, in Canada. And it found that one of those mesh pyramid tea bags, they're supposed to look fancy. Supposed to add value to the tea. They release in one cup of tea 11.6 billion pieces of microplastic and something like 3.6 pieces of nanoplastic in one cup. So the manufacturers, they all freaked out when that study came out. And some of them tried to change their bags and they switched to PLA, which is polylactic acid. It's still plastic and something, right? And they're still making plastic. Oh, so PLA is plant-based plastic. And we shouldn't, like I said, we shouldn't have to do this much research to have a cup of tea. So some of the paper bags have plastic in the paper, so they add like this thermal plastic to the paper. Some are okay. Republic of Tea. So I did a workshop about a month ago at a library, and it was a kombucha workshop. And we used tea bags because we had all these tables set up, and I thought, okay, tea bags are going to be easier. So I did a ridiculous amount of research. Well, I did a bunch of research on tea, and Republic of Tea. Their tea bags, according to their website, are unbleached paper. They don't have plastic so they're round tea bags, and they have like the pinched edges all around. And some tea bags like that have plastic in the glue. Anyway, they don't have any plastic. They're unbleached. So that was one brand. Or you can drink loose leaf. So that's just one thing. And then, yeah, the nanoplastics. So they're getting in the soil, and then the vegetables can draw them up through their roots with the water. So we're eating nanoplastics. And I mean, I don't know how you avoid that. But some vegetables have more, some fruit and vegetables have more plastic in them than others. I think you can drive yourself crazy if you know, look at which vegetable has more and figure your diet out from that. And but there are some things you can do. So like avoid highly ultra processed food, because that's going to have more hands with more gloves touching it. So there was a study a couple of years ago I read about in The Guardian, and it showed that fast food has more PFAS in it than regular food. And they figured out it was the gloves. All these different people are wearing gloves and they're touching the food. And so, there are more people who have contact with the food, the more it's processed. And so if you could avoid avoid highly like ultra processed food, which also comes in plastic packages. So plastic sheds, kind of like our skin is always shedding, so plastic sheds. And with liquids, the longer it's been in a plastic container, the more plastic it's going to shed into the bottle. So I think really more whole foods. Eat your vegetables, eat more vegetables and fruit. And unfortunately, that some of them they do have microplastic in them. And then there are some foods that have more, I think certain shrimp. Okay, don't quote me on this. I think certain like shrimp might have more plastic. And then salt. A lot of 90% of table salt has microplastics in it. Himalayan sea salt and Redmond sea salt. Those are from ancient seabeds that are, haven't been contaminated. The thing with salt, sea salt, it's from the ocean, which is filled with microplastic. So those two types don't have as much microplastic. I like Redmond sea salt because it's from Utah and I can get it. I don't get the Himalayan because it has to travel so far to get to me, and I can get the Redmond sea salt. And then there are some brands that claim they're plastic free. I haven't tried them. Vera Salt, I think, says that it's plastic free. I think it's also from like an ancient seabed, from some pristine place before we had microplastic. So those are a few things.
Right. Yeah, these are complicated. On the one hand, and then on the other hand, we just do the best that we can with all of this. So people are commenting and posting various kinds of links in the chat here, and thank you
Oh,
for
great.
everybody. Yeah. People are sharing information about their water purifiers and
Oh, good.
okay. They're using their French presses, okay, as an
Yep,
alternative to
yep.
bags. That's what I
Yeah.
recommend also.
And those, the Keurigs. So the plastic tea bags are my number because I drink a lot of tea. I've actually never had a cup of coffee. But
You've
no,
never,
I've never had a cup of coffee.
well, no, that's,
But
you
a
should
lot
put
of
that,
people, I know most people do. I'm like a freak.
you
But
should put
like
that in
those
your bio.
Keurigs, pardon me?
You should put that in your bio.
That's a good idea.
All
No one
right.
believes me.
Okay, so Lisa says I have a clearly filtered point of use unit at my kitchen sink and love it. A website is filled with information. All right, so a lot of um, people sharing ideas about water filters, okay,
Oh, good.
and
Yeah. Yeah,
various,
sorry, I'm not an expert on
right. Okay, so
I think the filters that filter out microplastic, they're pretty new, from what I understand.
right. Well, there's several links that people have put in, and this is a good resource to check. My understanding, I'm just in a learning process with this, as everybody is, but my understanding at this point is that what makes the difference with water filtration is if it goes through the carbon filter. Okay, so that seems to be what takes it out.
Mhm.
But since this is becoming such a important topic, uh, I'm sure that if there is a particular type of filter that you're interested in, that if you check out the website, it probably says something about microplastics at this point. And if it doesn't, you could just, contact them and they should know. They
Right.
should say, now, I do suspect, however, that there's a lot of water purification or filtration systems that don't get it out,
Hmm.
or that only get it out to a certain size. And I will mention here that one of the real challenges with this, um, from the medical standpoint, what is of greatest concern are the nanoparticles. Okay.
Hmm.
And so then the question for a company, a water company, purification company is does your filter get out nanoparticles,
Yeah.
not micro, okay? Because most filtration probably gets micro out, but nano is really the concern. And the concern is that that's what travels in the body. The body has some ability to resist microparticles to some degree that we ingest in the digestive tract, and move them out. But the smaller they get, the more they're going to penetrate and the more they're going to circulate. And that's, really challenging. So, okay, so people are commenting there, and people are also asking about different alternatives. Okay, Wendy has a powder shampoo and that she loves, and um, tofu is difficult to find, plastic free, and
Yeah, it
kind of
is.
things.
It is.
Right. There's
You,
so
you
many
can,
so many things like this, but
yeah.
my take on this, and so this is something that I've known about for quite a while, but my learning curve has accelerated quite a lot lately, and it's been coming into my awareness more medically over the last couple of years, and certainly over the last several months, I've really been delving into all of this. And I think that if I was going to offer one additional commentary here, because you're covering a lot of, the basics of what to do. Don't buy it in the first place. But let's talk about things that we may think are okay and they're not. Okay,
Mm.
that we may buy, and things that we could have some choice in. Like, for example, um, do we do we need our cars? Yes. And this is another example. Plastic is from fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep. Yeah, it's made of fossil
and
fuels.
and,
Yep.
and so it's all part of our entire civilization, global civilization, being dependent on fossil fuels. And in order to break up with fossil fuels, we have to break up with cars also. And that means tires.
Tires are, yeah.
Tires are a massive source of plastics in the
Yep.
environment and in
Yep.
the atmosphere also. Okay. And so, what other major categories of consumer products do you point out to people are problematic? One of the ones that has really come into focus for me is clothing recently.
Yep. Clothing. I was going to say clothing. Yeah.
What other big categories do we need to be more aware of, more educated about?
Well, clothing is one. So a lot of our clothes, especially like a lot of our clothes are made out of synthetic fabric, which is plastic. So, and when you wash them in the washing machine, they shed microplastic. It's one of the biggest sources of plastic pollution in our waterways or in the oceans. So natural fibers, um, cotton. I wish hemp was cheaper. Eventually it will be. Linen. If you already have, like so the pants I'm wearing right now, I got them at the thrift shop. These are, I think they're a cotton blend. Got them a long time ago. So I wish they were 100% cotton. They're not. But clothing, so when you buy new clothes, try, because you can't throw out your whole wardrobe. I think that kind of defeats the purpose. If we just like throw everything in the trash and buy all new stuff, like it's still consumerism. So, and well, another thing that's becoming more common is astroturf, the plastic lawns. That's popping up.
Loans.
Yeah, the plastic grass, the artificial turf. I'm seeing more of it in California. Not a it's not like every house has it, but in the neighborhood now, when I go for a walk, I do see it popping up, and people think it's more environmentally friendly because they don't have to water it. Well, you don't have to water native plants either. There are alternatives, but that sheds microplastic. It contains PFAS. It gets very hot, and so it burns paws and it burns feet. And another thing, dogs love to go wee wee on it, and you cannot get that smell out. So if you know someone who's considering getting it, you can tell them that, and that may convince them to get rid of it. But, and I've been to a few meetings in my city to complain about, or there are a couple of parks that want to put in a bunch of it. And people will say, but it's recyclable. Well, anything's recyclable if you throw enough money at it and build enough fancy equipment. It doesn't mean it will ever get recycled. And the plastic turf is not, it will not get recycled. It's just going to get landfilled, and it has to be replaced every several years. Depends, I guess, on the use. Causes more injuries.
Yeah.
I think, some plastic you can't avoid, for durable goods, but I think it's the throwaway stuff that's the worst. The single-use plastic. It's
Right.
hard to buy. So at my old job, I was saying, I had gone plastic free, and when I was still working there, and I talked about how I needed a new computer, and my boss said, well, I can't wait to see your hemp laptop. Good luck getting a plastic-free computer. I'm like, well, yeah, of course I can't get that, but I could get a refurbished one.
Well, this is a debate that's happening on the chat already. People are taking different positions, because
On what?
astroturf uses less water. And people are commenting about the clothes and how to fix their own and who wears plastic clothing. Well, all right. I think that
Synthetic, I mean, this,
you answered that. Who answers plastic
yeah, if
clothing?
it's
Virtually everybody.
synthetic,
Virtually everybody wears plastic
yeah,
clothing. And that's what
yeah,
polyester is. So
polyester, yeah.
carpeting, thank you. There's another.
Carpeting, oh, that's another thing, yes. So
And furniture.
vacuum and dust,
Yeah.
and that will suck up um microplastic. And yeah, if you can, it's hard to find a plastic-free sofa.
It is.
It is, but they're out there. It's expensive. So that's
That's
where it's
where
more
that's
expensive for
that's
me.
where the socioeconomic factor comes in.
That's going to be hard to find a plastic-free sofa because foam is plastic,
Right.
right? And it's also got all kinds of stuff in it.
Chemicals.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we've been using this term plastic. All right.
Hmm.
And let me just add a little dimension to this, that plastic itself is a certain family of polymer compounds that in themselves are not really very toxic. They're basically inert. But it's all the other stuff that goes into the making of the products that is dangerous. There's all these additives and the
Like the plasticizers.
plasticizers and all these other kinds of things. And these are the things that are released when they break down, you see. So the microplastics getting in the body, for example, uh, present a medical challenge physically because they're particles. But it's actually all the other chemicals that's in the plastic that are coming out into the tissues that are causing, the immunological reactions. And so this is something that it's very complicated actually, and it raises a basic question. How did we get here? Okay.
Oh,
How did all of this happen up to this extreme state? And it's been going on for how long now? When did you probably know, when did they first start making plastics?
Well, Bakelite was a type of plastic, so that was, I want to say 100 years ago, in the early 1900s. And then I think World War II. I think that probably was the start of it. But the throwaway culture really started like in the 50s. And if any of you have seen The Graduate, so if you haven't seen The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman, he graduates from college and he goes back home, and there's a scene where one of his dad's friends pulls him over and says, forget what Dustin Hoffman's character's name is. Says his name. Come here, I gotta tell you something. One word. Plastics. Did you get that? And he says, Dustin Hoffman says, yes, sir. Yes, Mr. So-and-so. Plastics are the future. Something like that. And I think if we could only go back to before that point. The reason we're here, well, I mean, greed. That's my opinion. Plastic is made of fossil fuels. It's their plan B. If the fossil fuel industry, when we finally get off of fossil fuels for our energy source, their plan B is to produce more plastics. So they are spending billions and billions of dollars building more plants to create more plastic. And so we talked about greenwashing way at the beginning. The most successful greenwashing campaign was started by an organization that is now called Keep America Beautiful. So back around the 60s, there were these bottle bills introduced, and they were going to force the companies making the beverage containers to clean up after themselves. Well, that would cost a lot of money. And so they pushed the onus of recycling, of cleanup. They pushed the onus of cleanup onto the public. And they came up with this term, litter bug. And they called people litter bugs. If you're littering, you're a litter bug, and just blamed the public for the product that they were creating. So they killed the bottle bills. They formed Keep America Beautiful. If you look at the sponsors of Keep America Beautiful, they are McDonald's, Anheuser-Busch, some tobacco company, Keurig, like all the big polluters. Because it would cost a lot if they had to clean up after themselves. We need reuse systems. We used to have them. We used to, in the town I grew up in, my small town, there was a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and everything was decentralized. Everything was local. And so they had glass returnable, refillable bottles, and those can be used over and over and over. Those were refilled, they were sent out. Well, if you're just making plastic, if you replace that with plastic that gets thrown away and the municipalities and the taxpayers and the public have to clean it up, your profits are going to go way up because you have no responsibility anymore to clean up. So
That's how we got here.
yeah. And now I have no proof of this, but things have become more and more packaged with more and more plastic. This is just a theory that the plastics industry that's in bed with the oil industry, because they're like the same thing. They must be going around to companies and saying, hey, if you packaged it this way. Anyway, that's just a theory I have. Because the packaging is just over the top. It gets worse. And although some companies, like you said, some companies, they are more aware now. There's much more awareness now than there was when I started in 2011. So there are all kinds of alternative products out there. And I think smaller businesses are doing a better job for the most part.
Right. These are all excellent comments. Thank you. Good background information. There is a very significant, serious political side to all of this, we know. It's linked to the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's about as political as it gets
Oh,
on
yeah, yeah, yeah.
planet
They're
Earth, right?
incredibly powerful. Yeah.
Fossil fuel industry and human existence are really the themes of the day. Um, but just to put this into perspective, both the use of uh, uh, you know, gasoline in our cars and plastic in the development uh, happen for a reason, and the reason is convenience.
Yep.
And really, at the time that all these things came out, people really weren't looking ahead very much. And the information was known fairly early on in, by the oil companies that this is going to cause global warming, and it was, stored away somewhere. But I think that the main issue, kind of the theme, that's coming out with all of this is that we are here, we are an educated group, and I would say that we are probably, in terms of the big picture, a minority of people, but an increasing audience, increasing awareness about these issues. And all of these things came in uh, because they gave a lot of benefits originally without really being considered in terms of where's it all going to end up.
Hmm.
And now we know that it's all going to end up in the atmosphere, and it's getting hotter and hotter, and it's all going to end up in the Great Pacific plastic patch. Okay. And so now we're actually seeing the full spectrum of things after many, many decades. And so this, I think, is really, uh, why we are here, what we have to do, and that we're all doing the best that we can. That's what's most important. And there are more and more people who are really disconnecting, one household at a time. And I know that countless people have done that because of your education, your uh, guidance. And now, as we do that, then we have to start looking at the next level, which is what are the consequences that are in the environment and what to do about the macro pollution and what to do about the micro pollution in the body. So for this particular audience, I think that we have a high level of awareness about how to do these things, how to minimize our plastic footprint. And people are doing that. They want to do it more. And innovation will come out of necessity, I think. A lot of that will probably get greenwashed. But I think that the next step with all of this is not just to be educated about what to do in our household, but now really start to think about what to do with our own health. And so I will use that as a little segue into announcing my next lecture here in just a minute and talk about the medical side of things. But let me turn that into a question first for you. Have you personally found anything in your overall health and well-being that you can attribute to this kind of lifestyle change that you have made? You got rid of plastics and you have moved towards zero waste, and that's a great contribution to society and to your home. Um, I know that sometimes when people do this kind of thing, that they notice real significant benefits in their health as well. Was there anything that happened in your case along these lines, or have you heard these kind of stories from people that just doing this whole thing is part of a healing process in general?
Well, personally, yeah, I became much healthier. And I tell people results may vary. I don't want to make any, wild claims and tell you yes. Because I stopped eating ultra processed food. Not that I ate a lot of it, but I started to eat more vegetables and more fruit, which is what we're supposed to eat. I started to ferment food because I wanted my vinegar. I started to make sauerkraut and dill pickles, and I had always baked bread, but I started making sourdough bread. And I mean, there's all kinds of information, all kinds of research showing that our overall health is affected by our gut. And fermented food can, I mean, it does boost your gut health. So yeah, I noticed 2 years into after cutting the plastic, and so my kids at the time when I started, they were 10 and 16. So they were getting a little bit older, but still, bringing home germs and stuff or bugs from school. And I remember 2 years in, I was lying in bed one day and I thought, I haven't had a cold for 2 years, which was really unusual. And so that's just my story. That's been my experience. Also, I was talking with someone and I said, I'm not as anxious as I used to be. And I think it's just because I'm older and wiser, and so my anxiety has gone down. And she said, don't you eat a lot of fermented food? And I said, oh, you're right. I do. And there have been studies that show that fermented foods can reduce your anxiety. There was one, it was over 10 years ago, a study from McMaster University in Canada. And they had a group of women that ate yogurt every day and yeah, it like reduced their anxiety. There was so it's not like there's proof out there. I was so surprised by that my health improved. That was a real shock because I just read about albatrosses feeding their young bottle caps, and I thought, oh, I'd want to be a part of that, and had no idea that I'd become healthier, but I absolutely did.
Wonderful. That's a great testimonial. Thank you. And it's a perfect example of how if we start taking care of one problem on this complicated mandala of issues that we're facing, that everything starts to improve. And you're absolutely correct about fermented foods and the gut-brain axis.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
This is something that I am going to be talking about. And I'll mention now that you are all invited. Everyone is invited to another free event next week. And this is going to be transitioning into the medical side of things. And this is going to be from 5 to 6:30 Pacific time on the 30th. And it is titled The Detoxification of Microplastics. And this is where we're going to start looking at the research that has been coming out, and you would be amazed. If you go to PubMed, the database, there are 18,000 research papers on microplastics. And so the scientific community is really well aware of what's going on here. And it hasn't been reaching the medical community as much. Okay, but I have been delving into this now for some time, and it is absolutely amazing the level of medical knowledge that is in these reports. And what I am doing is I am basically extracting the up-to-date research on the medical side and then combining that with the traditional herbology. And a lot of these reports are actually based on plant substances that are being found to be very, very helpful. And so we're learning things like the gut-brain axis has to be protected, and studies showing that fermented foods help protect the gut from microplastics, which then helps to protect the brain from microplastics. And so we're going to be discussing what the science is telling us now about how this form of toxicity is getting in, how it's moving around, how it's starting to create these problems, how these microplastic particles combine with heavy metals and pathogenic microbes and bind to your cholesterol. And I'm increasingly convinced that health issues now have a much, much greater degree of involvement with microplastics and has been recognized. So that's happening in a week, and you are all invited. And that's also going to be the launch into a full course. It's going to be a 6 week, I mean, a 6 hour, a 6 hour program that's going to be all solution based with natural medicine because there are a lot of things that we can do to protect the brain, to protect the gut, to protect the liver. So that is the next offering. And so, Anne Marie, let's go back to you. And I would just like to say thank you on behalf of everybody in this audience. Thank you for the work that you're doing and all of your students that you have been meeting and will be meeting. They all say thank you, and the animals say thank you, and the earth says thank you for everything that you have done to make a difference in your life and the immunity of your family and then in the community. And thank you for your presentation and sharing all of your experience with us. So let's find out where we can follow you. I have zerowastechef.com, zerowastechef.com. Was there anything else that you wanted to let people know?
I also have a newsletter on Substack.
Okay,
It's,
that's in the chat. That's in the chat.
oh, okay, good, good. Oh, thanks.
Okay, wonderful. So everybody, learn more, study more with Anne Marie. And so again, thank you to everybody for joining us. And Wendy and Karen, thank you again for helping with all of this for months to put this all together. Thank you so much. And Anne Marie, thank you for your time. Thank you
Oh,
for
thank.
all that you're doing. And so hope to see everybody down the road at the next event.
Well, thank you, David. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.
Fun.
All right. Take care, everybody, and enjoy getting healthier and doing the best we can with this complicated situation.